interference. Thank you, Amanda. Yes, we are going to be recording this meeting, and it will be available on the website shortly after tonight. So first I wanted to, again, thank you for coming, and then hand it over to Gretchen to say a few words from Commissioner about public safety. Gretchen?
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and hope your holiday season is going well. I'm setting the tone. I wore my red festive shirt today, blouse, excuse me. Yes, I just wanted to share with you guys that Commissioner Garcia held a public safety communications meeting yesterday for some of his key employees that, you know, deal with the public and we're out there. And so it was a really good training to help us to know, you know, to remind everyone, public safety is his top priority. It's his number one thing. And that doesn't mean just with crime. That means in everyday, everything we do. You know, anything from our parks to our schools to our streets to neighborhoods. So when he also wants to keep his staff up to date and informed about some of the past initiatives and the current ones that he's brought into precinct 2 since he's been in office. So just wanted to share that with you guys.
Thank you, Gretchen. And with that, I wanted to, again, thank everyone for coming, and circling back to this plan again, I wanted to emphasize that we're working really hard to make this your plan, to make this plan be community-led. And that's kind of the goal of this task force, right? You guys are the leaders in the community, and we wanted to make sure you know that feel free to ask questions, provide comments. We're going to be hitting you with a lot of recommendations and a lot of ideas that we're developing. But we really want your feedback so that we can refine it and make this plan reflect what you would like to see. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mary to go over the agenda.
All right, good evening, everyone. So just a little housekeeping. So this evening, we'll do some introductions, give you an update of where we are in the process overall of the study. We also want to recap what we've heard from you thus far, both in the conversations that we've had with some of you and in the survey that has been both to the task force and to the community. From that survey, we've synthesized some community needs, and then from there, developed some objectives and recommendations that will be the majority of the meeting this evening. And then at that point, we'll have ample time for discussion throughout this process so that we can really gather your feedback and then talk about next steps.
Hey, Amanda, would you mind going to the next slide?
Can you see my screen, Jorge? The Harris County redistricting?
No, actually, I'm looking at the intro slide. I don't know if that's just my screen.
Yeah, it's the same on mine, Amanda.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
All right, let us reshare and see if we can't fix that.
Okay, I see it now.
All right.
There we go.
You see the county map?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Great. Now, thank you. We just wanted to, again, before diving into the plan, we wanted to touch upon the redistricting. I'm sure it's in everyone's minds. This happened fairly recently, and we wanted to let you know that we view the community as one community, and of course we're gonna continue this plan as we had envisioned. We do have now a portion of Highlands that is within Harris County Precinct 3. And so we have invited a representative to join the task force. I'm not sure if he has joined us today or he has someone else represent. We invited Randy Shilhab. Randy, are you with us today?
Is it Randall? Does he? Oh, no. Okay, then never mind.
I do not see him on the list.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll just keep Precinct 3 involved as we move forward with this plan. Again, we envision the community as one community regardless of precinct boundaries. And so ultimately, once recommendations are made and projects are kicked off in the Precinct 3 side, it'll be up for Precinct 3 to implement. But as far as this plan is concerned, we're going to move forward, keeping our partners of Precinct 3 in the loop. All right, with that, I'll bring it back to Mary, actually to Amanda to introduce. Never mind, it's still mine. I was going to do a little bit of introductions. I think you guys know most of us. The Harris County team is over on the left. Again, my name is Jorge Bustamante. You all know Gretchen. She's a rock star. We also have Brian Brown and Alberto with the engineering department, and Pearl and Ismat with Harris County Public Health. With that, I will hand it to Amanda to go over introductions.
My turn now. So I'm Amanda Haney. I'm with Clark Condon. Mary Kyler's is with me right next to me. We have a consultant team, and several of them are on this call. Jamie Masterson is our urban planning consultant. Jim Webb and Monisha are our economic development consultants from the Goodman Corporation, and they are also simultaneously leading the McNair-Lenas plan that you may have heard a little bit about. And then Ali and Nick are with Holloway. Nick is on the call today. And then Ricky Gonzalez with LAN Engineering is our mobility and transportation consultant. And then Charmaine is on the call, and Anna, if you're present at the community center, Anna is there. And they are both with Possible Missions, our public relations consultants. All right, so let's jump in. Project status. So right now we are in the recommendations phase. So we are the third little raindrop, upside down raindrop, task force meeting number 2. So we have completed our assessment phase. We started the project back in July. We went through phase 1 discovery. We analyzed the different site conditions and beginning to talk to the constituents and the residents. And now we're in the phases where we're developing recommendations, developing plans, doing due diligence, partnerships, looking for funding sources. And then we will eventually turn into a report. We'll finalize the report so that we can get it over to the county for adoption. So we did have our public survey that Jorge mentioned already, and that ran from October to December. And it actually is still open, but we received about 60 responses, and that's not including the various different in-person responses that we received. We attended the Highlands Jamboree. We also attended the fall market at the Apostolic Church. And we also attended a couple of game days and Rotary Club meetings at the community center, and then also at the Methodist Church. So we are well on our way in our recommendations phase. So what you'll see tonight is our preliminary recommendations that we want to get your feel on. We want to understand if you have concerns or if you have questions. So we really want to make sure we set this culture now of it being a open discussion. We want you to feel like you're not interrupting or interjecting. We want you to be able to let us know what your thoughts are and your feelings are about a lot of these recommendations. So I touched on this a little bit, but what we heard. So the survey was split up into categories, and that is how we were able to categorize our questions and kind of get a little bit more targeted responses from you, the task force members. So yes, thank you very much to those who filled out our little lengthy survey. It was great input, and I really appreciated all of your comments and feedback that we went through during that process. So we've heard road conditions, traffic, congestion, that there's a lot of truck traffic, some issues with access to the community, lack of small businesses, lack of grocery stores, the need for attraction and retention of new businesses, parks and open space. We know that we have really great parks in this area, but the access is not as clearly defined as we would like it to be. The distance to parks has been mentioned as sometimes an issue for some people. And then always, more shade, more tree canopy, more activities. And as Gretchen mentioned, one of the main priorities of Commissioner Garcia, safety in parks, public safety, safety in the community. We know that there are some environmental issues and quality issues that we've heard. Safety while interacting with these natural environments, safety while fishing. We know about the Superfund sites and that there have been some air quality concerns brought up and studies that have been completed to date. And then also cultural assets and social services. So in need of a refresh, that came up a lot of times in some of the comment portions of the survey. The need for more community events, programming, and involvement. And then again, public safety, more law enforcement interaction, and the perception of law enforcement, and then addressing homelessness. So all that to say that these have turned into identified community needs. And so those main overarching topics are public safety, increased law enforcement, social services, community engagement, infrastructure improvements, environmental awareness, and general beautification. So like I mentioned, we went through a series of community engagement exercises, outreach programs, and events, and then the surveys that we did, and we really gathered what we feel is a good cross-section from the community of the issues and the concerns. And that has been translated into these three main objectives for this community plan. So creating connectivity within the community through park improvements, infrastructure improvements, creating a multimodal transportation environment, and enhancing the community atmosphere. Then fostering community growth and prosperity through civic and social initiatives, and helping to manage and implement the desires and the needs of this community, and also attracting future businesses. And then lastly, the third main objective is to improve public safety and the awareness through partnerships with nonprofits and agencies, and providing the needed social services and aid that we have heard from this community. So with that, I am going to take a brief break, and I'm going to open it up to see if anybody has any questions, comments, any big picture thoughts, anything that you want to chime in before we move on.
And you are welcome to unmute to give us your comments, or also just put them in the chat. Either way will work.
There will also be several more of these planned little brief intermission breaks. So if you need some time to warm up and think about what you want to say, there are plenty of other opportunities. So if you are okay, Jorge, I'll keep going. All right. Okay, so our recommendation timeline. So I want to reiterate that this is a work in progress, and it is what you're going to see now is our preliminary recommendations. So we haven't defined the categories just yet of which category that the recommendation will fall in, because based on our due diligence and based on our vetting efforts, it could shift from category to category. So we have short term, which are going to be precinct led, and this is within 1 to 5 years, and that'll be the low hanging fruit, the easier completion projects. Then we move into more of a short to midterm, and that's what we're considering a collaborative effort. So that's again a 1 to 5 year completion rate, and it's more the collaborative effort with identified partnerships. And then our long-term visionary recommendations that are more of a 5+ year completion, and that is with a series of partnerships and a series of identified partners. Okay. So overall recommendations, I'll turn this over to Mary to run through some of these.
All right, so previously when we met, we had 5 different categories. Those were economic development, mobility and transportation, parks and open space, environmental quality, and cultural assets and social services. So within those, that's the way we structured our survey and have been able to gather our information. Now, some of the recommendations that will be made cross in between these different categories and can help in different areas. So these are the overarching recommendations. Within each of these, we'll go into some subsets of very specific recommendations. And so just to give you the broad overview, we are looking for the economic development portion at the creation of a management district. And this will help facilitate the public safety and possibly improve law enforcement within the region. From the mobility and transportation perspective, we have looked at different roadways based on the comments we've received to date that either would require reconstruction or other improvements that may improve pedestrian circulation throughout the community. So part of the recommendations proposes a network of sidewalks and shared use paths to provide better access. This access is not only to businesses, but also to parks and open space and other community amenities. Within the parks and open space and environmental quality categories, we've identified the need to provide better access to the parks, also to amenitizing and improving the parks that are within the area as well. And then possibly the creation of some nature parks that would serve dual purpose by putting these lands under conservation. And finally, from the perspective of economic development and then cultural assets, we're looking at a creation of a civic core district, which highlights the area within your community that already has many civic-oriented schools and churches located closely together. And then to build upon that through the use of gateways and monuments, and also just general beautification within the community itself.
So we're going to take another quick break and see if anybody has any comments or questions about any of these overall recommendations. We want to open this up, make sure that we're kind of on the right track. We want to get the temperature for this group and see, does this look like what you feel is going to benefit your community? Do you think that we are, on the right track?
And with that, I will start with the one comment we've received thus far in the chat. This is from Angela, and it's regarding the redistricting. And so between the fact that now precinct 2 and 3 is the division line goes along Main Street. The question is in regards to these projects proceed in precinct 2, what will happen to improve the community at large? So this study will continue on looking at the community holistically and not be separating based on the precinct 2 and 3 boundary lines. And so these sets of recommendations will be adopted by the county at large. So there is the possibility for both precinct 2 and 3 to work together for the full implementation of any of these recommendations. There is also a question about a management district. And so we have a whole series of slides on that, which Monisha will go through in a couple minutes, and it will, I think, really help explain it. And what we can do after we go through those slides is pause for a moment and see if there are any more questions regarding that. Any other overarching questions right now?
Okay, all right. We are going to turn it over to Monisha with the Goodman Corporation, and she's going to go through our creation of the management district.
Hey everyone, good evening. Thanks, Amanda. And that question is a great segue into the slide. So I guess the first question that we want to answer is, what is a management district? A management district is a public entity that's created to supplement improvements that are provided by a city or a county. And they're authorized to do a variety of things. They can fund additional security. They can deal with nuisances through litter, graffiti, and trash cleanup. They can create programs for small businesses and help incentivize them. They can also create another entity in the community that can serve as a forum and a group to discuss and address various civic issues. One important thing that they can do is they can leverage grants and funding. And through the revenue that they receive, they can also provide a sustainable funding mechanism for various programs, including the ones that are proposed in this plan. So a management district is funded by commercial property tax assessments and sales tax. That part would require an election, but I should note that Highlands and Lynchburg are already at their maximum allowed state sales tax. So really it would be commercial property tax assessments that would be funding the management district. So to go about creating one, we would need to develop a service plan. We would have to petition the owners who own the majority of the assessed value in the study area, and then levy the property tax assessment. So one thing that's under consideration right now is how to go about structuring such a district. As Amanda and Mary had mentioned before, we are also working next door in the McNair and Linos communities for another community plan. So we've been having joint discussions about how to integrate these areas in Eastern Harris County and in Precinct 2, since a lot of these issues are common to all of these communities. And if you have any thoughts about how we can group these communities, we would welcome that. And we'll also be potentially coming back to you at a future time for further input on how you would like to see the management district structured. So to answer your question, there's a lot of possibilities with the management district and how they can address some of these issues that are faced in this study area.
So before we move on to the next portion of economic development recommendations, we have a question that Mary will read from Angela.
So Manisha, this is directly in relation to who will manage the management district. So this is the specific question is in regards to the near Northwest Management District, where the turned control over to a portion of tax dollars over to a small group of citizens. So we're inquiring how the different board is set up for each of the management districts.
I think it would depend. Usually management districts are run by a board of directors, and that would be determined with how the district is structured geographically. If there's one for Highlands, then it would be folks from the Highlands. If it's a joint one between Highlands, Lynchburg, and some of the other communities, then we would have to think about how best to populate that board.
Okay, excellent. So we have one more question.
I could chime in here for a second too. It really depends on the legislature as well, right? So ultimately, this recommendation needs to go to the state legislature, and so at this level of a community plan, we're supporting the benefits of a potential management district. But again, if it's something that the community would like to see or would not like to see, that's something that we can tweak and move forward. And again, ultimately, if this goes to the legislature and all those details get worked out, each management district is actually very, very, very specific, and each bill that creates a management district is very customized. And so that's definitely something that can be modified as this recommendation gets implemented.
So we have a couple more questions about the management district. One of them is in regards to how the management district will address enticing new businesses to coming to the area. Are there going to be any types of business and zoning addressed by the management district? And then we have another question as if there's another option in lieu of a management district is to provide these similar types of services.
Sure. So to answer those questions, a management district, depending on what powers it has, they can assist with business attraction and retention. That's something that would be under their purview. And then to answer the other question, in terms of what are the other options, I guess that would depend on specifically what aspect you're referring to. If it's, I guess it would just depend on what function of the management district. There are different options for, various responsibilities that a management district could have. So it could be empowering another organization. It could be the county providing a service. It really just depends.
Okay. Excellent.
Chime in a little bit too as well, especially for Ramoni Williams. I guess the benefit of a management district is that it has a very dedicated funding source. There are other sort of organizations that can help with the recommendations that we're outlining here. But for example, like a CDC, right? Like a Community Development Corporation. But the challenge there is that the CDC will need to find its own funding source. And that comes with its downsides as well. But that's something that we can look into if the task force thinks that we should go that route.
So we have another one about will development of the management district divert possible funds from proposed funds for projects? And I think Jorge, go ahead, whoever was.
Oh, I was going to say that a management district is funded via commercial property tax assessments. Other projects in this plan will be funded through various other mechanisms. And Jorge, if you want to chime in.
Sure. I think, again, it depends on how the district is created. There's a number of options in terms of the funding as well. But yeah, in the general sense, the commercial property tax assessment is something that is not taken away from another entity.
Okay, so I think in general, we've gathered there's some concern about the management district. We can put together a little more information on that to make sure that we can further answer any of your concerns and also explore other opportunities for different types of districts to see if there's other benefits. So we've noted that, but we would also like to now move on to this next one, and I'll let Monisha walk through this increased patrolling services slide.
Sure. So, public safety is obviously a big concern and a big issue. So one way that there could be increased police presence and patrolling would be through a management district. They could provide additional security in two ways, either a supplemental contract with the constable or sheriff through Harris County. There's a variety of districts that contract with these entities to provide supplemental security. Another way that a management district or another entity could go about having supplemental security services through a private security firm, like Steel is an example that's in Harris County. So that would be one way to have additional police presence, which would help reduce crime and increase the perception in the neighborhood of safety. And there are pros and cons and trade-offs to each of them, but those are two options.
Right.
And I noticed that there was a question from Nancy, which I can just answer quickly. It says, do we even have businesses for the funding of a management district and bid to track?
So Monisha, you've broken up a little bit. I'm going to repeat the question. And if you come back in, I will stop talking. But the question is, do we have enough businesses to support funding a management district? And would it detract from businesses wanting to move to this area if they know that they were going to be taxed more? And this is a perfect question for Monisha to answer.
So, oh, I think she's back.
She's back, but you're muted.
Oh. Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. I guess the internet train just hit me. So to answer that question, actually, let me just pull it up on the chat again. So as part of the management district assessment process, the owners of these commercial properties would have to be talked to. They'd have to be petitioned. And the management district can provide a variety of services. I mean, they can provide beautification, they can make the area look nicer, feel safer, right? So I think there's a trade-off, depending on the activities of the management district, it could make the area an even more attractive place to locate.
Thank you for that answer, Monisha. If there's no more questions about the management district right now, we'll move into continuing with Monisha about some more economic growth recommendations that we have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Amanda. So I know there's a lot of slides to cover, so I'll try to go through these quickly. So in terms of housing, we can find ways to incentivize new construction for various price points, make sure everyone who wants to live in the study area can afford to live there. The economic development recommendations tie into a number of other recommendations that Amanda and Mary will touch upon later. But the idea would be that we would want transportation and mobility improvements to be entwined with economic development initiatives for Main Street. So there's additional opportunities there for commercial space and potential incentives. You can have some dedicated business attraction and retention programs led perhaps by the Chamber of Commerce in Highlands. So some various business opportunities would be some restaurants and cafes and some small scale retail. And we can also leverage a transportation reinvestment zone to reimagine the whole corridor. So that would, integrate again, transportation and economic development. And along with that, facilitate a cohesive look for the community with a facade program, additional signage, also on Main Street to generate foot traffic and attract folks to these businesses, have some programming and festivals such as farmers markets and community activities. That would be like a family-friendly destination. So the study area also has great natural features. They'll talk more about the reservoir later on in this presentation, but there's also the Lynchburg ferry. So one idea could be to support recreation in general and also tourism to create a destination for both residents and visitors. So the idea would be that people could go to the Highlands Reservoir, grab some lunch or visit a farmer's market on Main Street, support the local businesses, and then hop on the ferry in Lynchburg to see the San Jacinto Monument. So really make this into a regional attraction and leverage some tourism dollars as well.
Thank you, Monisha. I'm going to segue into some of the mobility and infrastructure recommendations that Monisha briefly touched on that are intertwined with some of this economic development. So the purpose of this is to create safer streets, reduce some of the crashes, and make a more walkable community and a safe pedestrian experience. So we have proposed several different roadways that we feel that are up for redesign, and also East Houston for roadway realignment. So I'm going to explain the difference between the two. So redesign would be a complete redesign and reconstruction of the actual road surface. And that could include widening, it could include a median, it could include thicker paving. And then a realignment is more of a shifting of the lanes. And so it's not as intrusive and as full-blown scale as a complete reconstruction. So you can see on the map over here, we have the existing intersections and the existing roads. The blue is the roads that we are deeming up for candidates for redesign. So that would be Main Street, 2100, East Wallsville, Thompson Road, and then also, in South Main Street as well as it goes down. And then the ones that we have for realignment is East Houston. And then we also show on this map the existing signalized intersections, and then where we are proposing intersections that should be signalized, or could be, signalized. So that would be Thompson and Wallsville, also East Canal in Maine, and then San Jacinto in Maine. And that ties into the Civic Core recommendation that we'll get into a little later on. So I'm going to briefly go through these. So Main Street, that's the most prominent road, and that would be the most intrusive and full-blown construction program. So this would need to be more of a phased approach. So phase one, we would launch a corridor study. Understand the condition of the roads, understand what the traffic issues are, take into consideration some of the things that we've heard from the survey, and that would definitely go into that study. And then a phase two would be to consider some interim improvements, such as restriping or directional signage, creating some dedicated street alignments. And then a phase three could be a complete reconstruct, excuse me. This would include thicker paving to address the truck traffic. This could be converting to a boulevard style. So what you see in this bottom section of the road, that would be a future possible cross section of Main Street. It would include 8-foot wide sidewalks on both sides of the street. It would include street lighting and branded banners, specifically in the civic core idea that we will get to in a little bit. So this one is a phased approach. East Wallsville is another candidate for redesign, and we would want to reconstruct the road in the portions that are deemed not as good condition. And that would be thicker paving to, again, counteract the truck traffic. It would incorporate an 8-foot wide sidewalk on both sides of the street. And in some portions, it would be only one side of the street, as you see in the section here. And it would convert this open ditch on one side, and sometimes both sides, depending on where the walk will be, to a culvert system. That's what you can see here. Oops. Thompson Road. Again, thicker paving for truck traffic. This was another one that was identified as one of the main truck routes, and incorporating an 8-foot wide sidewalk and a covered culvert situation as well. So at the top section, you can see this is what it looks like today. And the bottom section is a proposed road cross section of what Thompson could be. Okay, and then our roadway redesign. So this is East Houston. So there's two options for this that we want to run by you. So road realignment. So that you can see in the section that is at the top right over here. So the bottom left is the existing cross section of what it is out there today. So option A is shifting the lanes slightly and allowing for an 8 to a 10-foot shared use path. And that would be on the south side of the street, and that would connect from Main Street to Highlands Reservoir. And then it would, in order to add that sidewalk, we would convert that covered ditch or the ditch to a covered culvert and allow for the sidewalk creation. And we would incorporate streetlights on both sides of the street. Option B, which is the bottom section, is a road redesign. So this is maintaining the road alignment. So you can see in the bottom section, we maintain that alignment. And we incorporate a slotted curb. So there's still drainage and there's still a barrier between the roadway and the sidewalk, but we would cover the culvert on the one side and allow for the sidewalk to be there. So there's two different options here that we could look into based on the conditions of the road. Again, we aren't suggesting to tear up a road that is in good condition. We aren't suggesting that at all, but we do know that there are some portions of these roads that are already starting to deteriorate. And so this is how we plan to counteract that. So driver and pedestrian safety improvements. This goes along with public safety, but in a different light. So this is, achieving safer atmosphere for community members, for people who are walking, for people who are driving, and hopefully alleviate some of the congestion on the roads. So some of our recommendations are incorporating streetlights. There have been priority streets that have been noted by the community on some of the surveys, and also the community liaison department and Gretchen and her team, they have noted a few as well. We would also like to propose signals at certain intersections that you saw on that map a few slides ago. Canal at Main Street, Wallsville at Thompson, two very busy streets, and then San Jacinto at Main Street. And this is right by the fire department. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but we are proposing a pocket park there, building upon the pocket park that is there currently. Proposing updated street signage throughout the entire community, and then also investigating potential to add no truck through traffic signs and and investigating how we can enforce that so that we can protect the condition of some of our roads. So speaking of
Amanda,
shared, yep.
It looks like there's a lot of questions in the chat regarding some of the stuff that you've presented so far. Let's pause real quick and
Sure.
hear some feedback from the community on this.
All right, so we've had a series of questions that all correlate relative to the improvements along Main Street. So instead of reading them each out, I'll just kind of combine this. So I think primarily the concern is where do the improvements fit in relative to the existing businesses and structures. So the intent would be to focus on placing the improvements inside of the existing right-of-way. So that that would be the space where all of the buildings should fall out with outside of that zone. So hopefully there's no encroachments in that space. So the intent would be not to impact the existing businesses from a street improvement perspective, but to provide better access to them. So, and that would be via the the new pedestrian sidewalk realm that would run along the front of the buildings. So hopefully that answers your question in regards to where does the impacts on the businesses and how does it fit within the existing roadway with it itself today. There was also a concern about Wallsville. Nancy asked if it could be widened. I would due to traffic congestion. So I would like to ask for a little more clarification on that. Do you mean widen in the sense of adding additional lanes of traffic? Is that the intent, or just wider lanes, not necessarily more lanes, but just like a little more clarification on what you're suggesting? More lanes. Okay, thank you. So we'll take that into consideration. We have a engineer that we're working with, and so they can help us study that. But once again, since this is a very developed area, the intent would be to place all of the improvements within the existing right-of-way. So we'll see if that's something that can fit in, and if the usually under circumstances like this, traffic studies are conducted to determine the amount of traffic on the roads, and that helps determine both the number of lanes and what is suitable for the amount of movement. So that would be part of the process for moving forward, is to conduct one of these traffic studies. Okay.
And I think Mary's answer touches on the last question about the expansion of Wallsville being 4 lanes. We'll need to do some more engineering studies with that and get with our engineer on that one. So we have noted that question, and we do plan to follow up.
Okay, and then one more about streetlights. All the neighborhoods need streetlights. Okay, so the streetlights, we have noted that it's a big endeavor to light the number of streets that were within the community. So I think part of the process will be looking at high priority streets and then working out broader into there to ensure that the high traffic streets, start with those with improving lights, and then focus on broadening that over the years.
So Angela asked a question about some clarification on the thicker lanes versus the no truck traffic. So thicker lanes would be for, okay, so let me back up. The signs, you can put a sign up all day, but if truck drivers do not want to abide by that, they're still going to drive on the roads. So there is the potential that we could enforce that, and that I will turn that to Jorge in a moment to expand on that a little bit. But the heavy the thicker paving would be to really protect ourselves and our roads so that we won't have potholes, because there will be trucks that do drive. And for the second part of the question about what about businesses that depend on large trucks, Main Street is not one of the ones that we are considering these signs, because we do know that that is one of the major routes in and out of the community, and the industry does rely on that. So that would not be one that we would institute these signs. Jorge, do you have any expansion on the process for the no truck traffic signs?
Sure, sure. Yeah, so ultimately the county has to abide by the Texas manual on traffic control devices, the TMUTCD. And so our traffic department conducts a traffic study and is only able to install signs that are recommended as part of a traffic study. So the actually figuring out which signs go where will require a traffic study to determine that location and the type of signs that are placed.
Thank you. Okay.
So I think we have, there was just one more question about in the chat that I think we've missed, and that's in regard to land acquisition for new businesses for economic development. Eddie wants to revisit that. So we have an open comment period at the end. So I would like to come back and have a bigger discussion about the economic development when we get closer to the end of the presentation. So we will, if you don't mind, I'd like to table that for now, and we can look through the rest of these recommendations and revisit that.
Okay, so I am going to move on to the Lynchburg Loop. So this is a creation of a shared use path, and Isma is going to, from Public Health, is going to touch on the next slide after this one about some more shared use paths. But this one specifically is for Lynchburg. So creating a shared use path with signage and mile markers. And as you can see on the map here, we've identified different types of walking surfaces. So in the darker blue along Independence, we're proposing a sidewalk off of the side of the road with a buffer, of course. And then the orange you see is what we're considering on-street pedestrian paths. So this will be striping on the road, designating a pedestrian lane. And then the green is what we're considering shared use paths. And so those will be wider lanes for pedestrian use. And that will be to get people to and from some of the amenities that you see on here, the Four Corners, the Church on the Rock, Burnett Park. And then what we're considering Lynchburg Loop, that will be coined this nice play on words over here, is that what you see in the lighter blue dashed line, and that'll be a loop that will have the mile markers and allow people to track their exercise, but also be able to stop at the park, get around, and it'll really hopefully tie in that community and neighborhood together. So then I'll turn it over to Isma to talk about some more creation of shared use paths.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So to expand a little bit more on the recommendation to create shared use paths, we're going to focus a little bit more on creating safe and accessible routes for school children as well as pedestrians to walk and bike to and from school, and also focus on connecting the shared paths with neighborhoods. And so the recommendation that we have is implementing the Goose Creek ISD district-wide Safe Routes to School plan, which Harris County Public Health completed about 2 years ago. And so taking those recommendations and hosting events such as walk to school days or bike to school days gets students engaged and encouraged to walk and bike to school. And so partnering with the local schools, Highlands Elementary, as well as the middle school and high school, to make sure that students and pedestrians have safe routes to school is really important for us. And then lastly, prioritizing both pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure improvements to and around the schools. And then I'll turn it back over to Mary.
Thanks, Isma.
All right, thank you. So the next recommendation regards public transit. We've heard some concerns about providing access to some amenities, particularly Lee College to support access to night classes. So what we've looked at is possibly improving the transit system so that could facilitate those classes. What you see shown in the orange are also new stops on the route. Part of this is to provide better access to some of the existing community features, like the community center and the library. So expanding the system so that there's better access to parks and amenities. And then in addition to that, there is a program with the county to provide shelters at some of the stops. And so we would also like to explore implementing shelters throughout this large system.
In the event of time, I'm going to skip this brief break, but we will have more, I promise.
Okay. So some of the other recommendations now are in regards to environmental quality. So part of this is first ensuring that the public is aware of all of the issues. We understand that there's much concern about the Superfund site, but also there was recently the completion of a air quality report. So building upon that, the report itself recommended the addition of air monitoring stations in this region of Harris County. What we would recommend is potentially implementing one of those new air monitoring stations. Also, as part of this, also providing phase 1 ESAs. This is a normal process if there happens to be any new land acquisitions by the county out of this study to ensure that those ESAs are completed. And then from the water perspective, ensuring that all of the fish consumption signs throughout the region are up to date and in sufficient locations. This is one of the comments we've received from the community. And then starting as well, concerns about water well health and ensuring that there's enough education about that within the region so all community members understand those elements. Part of this also links into nature parks. So there are quite a few areas on the northwest side of the study area that are large undeveloped parcels, and these offer an environmental benefit both from water quality and air quality. So part of this would be putting conservation easements over these spaces, but also providing access to them as well so that they are a recreational amenity for the community. So as you should have seen on our survey, there were some questions about whether or not providing access to these areas is desired. We received very positive responses. So part of this program would be to continue the restoration efforts of some of the wetlands that are occurring, implement these conservation easements, and then there's also a parcel of land that's owned by the Port Authority and possibly turning that into a large park where community members could have access. Other improvements, we've been in conversation with SJRA. They are the property owners for the Highlands Reservoir. So although the reservoir has a big function of providing water throughout this region, there's also an existing use of the space from a recreational component. So I'm sure you've seen the fishing piers and access out to the lake itself. What we would like to see is those access points improve so that they are comply with accessibility code, that they have better designated parking and clearer points of entry into the space itself so that it becomes more usable for the community. Other elements may be the implementation of disc golf, but working in partnership with SJRA. So this is one of the things that we are exploring to provide a better amenity for the community. And then building upon that are also improvements to the existing Harris County parks. So there are several within the community. And yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll take this one over. So as Mary mentioned, there are several parks in the community, and we touched on this earlier, that they are very well done. They have great pieces of playground equipment. So really, our biggest recommendation would be to provide ADA access to these so that each amenity in the park can be accessible from any person with any different ability type. And we would create pedestrian access to the surrounding neighborhoods as well. So some of the neighborhoods are blocked off by fences to the parks. And so creating that opportunity to allow pedestrians to walk to these parks, this is something that we've heard on the surveys. We would want to incorporate some more seating opportunities, specifically at Stratford Park and at Highlands Sports Complex. Then also renovating the bridges over the channel in Highlands Sports Complex. So right now there's a very nice bridge that goes over a waterway in the back portion of the sports complex, but unfortunately it's not accessible to get to it by somebody in a wheelchair, or and it's something that could definitely become a better amenity. So making that bridge a little bit more accessible and wider for more use. Upgrading some of the seating and the scoreboards at Highlands Sports Complex. We heard this comment from some of the surveys as well, making that a little bit more upgraded. And then Allison R. Piers, incorporating a trail system with boardwalks and educational signage, just kind of piggybacks off of the creation of the nature parks. And then in the future, a possible nature center at that Allison R. Piers nature sanctuary.
All right, and before we move on to the next slide, we've had a couple questions about toxins in the water and the additional fishing piers. I would like to clarify, so the fishing piers are proposed inside the Highlands Reservoir itself, not along the San Jacinto River, which is in proximity to the Superfund site. So they're two separate water sources. One is coming through the canal system straight from Lake Houston. So it is not a contaminated water. It's not in proximity to the contaminated water source. So just wanted to clarify that we're not proposing fishing piers along the river itself.
Did you see the last one? Yeah, okay. All right. So one more before we take a quick break. Safe access to Highlands Community Park. So this is something that we've heard as well in community conversations. So we'd like to make people aware of some of the safety concerns, but also make it so that it's the perception and the overall atmosphere is a safe one. So people will want to use this park, especially this time of year when it's getting dark at 5 o'clock. So there is access currently on the backside, and it's from Cherry Street. So we want to pave the road, or pave the trail connection that's been walked and beaten into the grass, but we'd want to make it so it was paved and connect with an accessible ramp to Cherry Street. And then also we want to renovate the fencing and the gate that is there currently to a more semi-transparent fencing for maximum visibility, so that somebody can't be hiding behind the fence or sneak up on anyone. And the gate will be a lot more usable and safe. And then incorporating a series of pedestrian lighting, whether those are bollards or whether those are pedestrian height poles, but really lighting that area up so that it feels usable. So with that, I'm going to take a brief break and open it up to see if anyone has any other questions. I see we do have one.
All right. Jorge, can I turn this question over to you? And it's a lengthy question. I hope you've read it, because I'm not going to read it out loud.
Sure, of course. Thank you, Randall, for your question. It looks like you are talking about first thanking our deputies, which we support, of course. Or what's the proposal for empowering our current task forces by growth or authority? I think I see this two ways. One, we have certain recommendations that fit within this community plan. Obviously, you know, making changes to the DA is quite an undertaking, and it's not just about the Highlands community. So I completely understand where you're coming from, but that would be a little bit outside of our scope. Other than that, I think the potential for increased patrol and maybe, you know, if the management district conversation moves forward, then there is more sort of local control on the community, right? And so having a district that works for the community, by the community, would be helpful in that sense, and would be able to hire more patrol, or, you know, implement initiatives that are community led. And so I think that's kind of the approach that we're taking at this point. Please let me know if that addressed your question.
Okay. And then we have one more question from Eddie about the widening of I-10 and the current plan for rerouting of traffic down 2100. Yes, we are aware of that routing. And so, and we are taking it into consideration in part of this recommendation and study.
All right. All right. Okay, so we have a few more. Creation of a civic core. I'm going to turn this over to Mary.
All right, so the next series of questions really hone in on addressing improvements to the community at large. This first one is the creation of this civic core area, which already exists because, you know, this is the zone that has all of several schools and parks. It has the primary food town and library. So there's already a community amenities within the space, and our goal is to provide better access to these and to give it its own identity. And as part of this, it comes through both providing the sidewalks, many of these that Amanda already explained, overlay within the space, also providing a few other north-south connections that are those stretched shared use paths on the pavement itself. Looking at things like the banners and branding to really highlight the zone and just making this a very cohesive area. Now, on the next slide, we can see some of these elements in more detail. So the blue striping, blue lines represent the proposed striping that would be on surface lanes, since these are lesser used residential streets. So we feel that we can overlay the pedestrian and vehicular traffic in those locations. And then the green routes represent the space where we want to have the designated paths and sidewalks adjacent to the existing roadway area. All of the orange areas highlighted are the amenities that we would like to connect and provide better access to. And then, of course, that main primary access along 2100, and looking at the beautification and overlay of really pulling together both the roadway recommendations and some of the other recommendations that you've heard thus far this evening. Tying into this, really honing in on this identity for Highlands and Lynchburg, it starts with that access off of 2100. So as you guys have already expressed this evening, and with the concerns of the improvements along I-10, so some of these would be very long range improvements, but creating identity markers that would go within the text dot right of way. Those are represented by the large or orange dots that you see on the screen. And then also doing smaller monumentation. There's the one that's in the median today for Highlands, you know, doing some replacement and improvement and upgrades to that, both and provide one for Highlands and for Lynchburg, to really start to identify the community so that people understand when they're exiting off of I-10 that they're entering two distinct communities. And along with this comes beautification with planting as well. And building upon this is continuation of the beautification with planting and, you know, really utilizing that low maintenance plants to ensure that you know, it fits and they're natives within this corridor. And part of this would be focused on providing some planted buffers to screen some of the industrial sites that are immediately along the river, and focusing the beautification along that Main Street corridor primarily. So that is from the beautification standpoint. Some other community enhancements that are more related to improving community access to certain amenities. That includes upgrades to the Stratford branch library. We've heard from multiple people that, you know, there's the need to replenish the stock and increase the programs within this facility. So that's something that we are looking into.
And I'm going to take a quick pause, go back one slide so that I can pull up this graphic to address some of these questions. Yes, Angela, we will give a printable version of this. It will be available on the website and along with the recording of this meeting. And then to address Nancy's comment about any monuments or signage that are proposed need to be placed so that they do not obstruct Four Corners visibility. That's correct. We will have to abide by the regulations from the permitting departments in these areas, and then also the safety guidelines that are put in place. And so these monuments will not be able to be very tall or too close to the median noses. They will have to be set back a certain distance, what's called the site visibility triangle. And also we wouldn't want to obstruct any businesses or any view corridors to any of these businesses either. So the dots are really just general locations. And if this proposed recommendation moves forward, we would definitely start to hone in on a design and also partner with the precinct. They have a monument program already in place that they are in beta testing with Cloverleaf, sorry. And so we have a budget range that we would design to, and we would be able to start implementing some of these at a scale that would be suitable for this area.
And just to reiterate and address Randall's question, so this type of beautification on I-10 would be long range. Yes, TxDOT would need to complete their improvements first before any of this could be implemented. So it would be something that could come in the future. It could also be a potential partnership for implementation of all of these improvements. Some other community enhancements, and this builds upon some of the things that Monisha mentioned earlier. Hosting community events at the community center, expanding the after-school programs, senior programs, and the other programs that are currently hosted there. Potentially implementing a community garden at one of the Harris County properties and parks. Also looking into a beautification day to mitigate some of the nuisances within the community. And then looking to see if we could promote that family-friendly weekend activities, and whether that is a farmer's market or some other community-focused activities. And then finally, to address one other element that we've heard from the community about is the homeless outreach. So providing opportunities to support the homeless outreach and aid that is occurring currently, and expanding upon that with the different agencies and nonprofits. Partnering with the mental health providers to increase the programming within the area, and overall just supporting the advocacy efforts that are occurring within this region.
And Jorge, I'd like to turn over a question to you. Do you know the time frame for the new bridge over I-10 or at I-10?
That's a great question, Fran. I think, as I understand it, the last I heard, TxDOT is on working on a PEL. I'm blanking on the acronym definition, but it's basically a planning study for the I-10 corridor, basically from downtown to the county line. And so it would be, as I understand it, it would be quite a while until that project gets to construction. However, you know, if this monuments idea is something that the task force and the community would like us to move forward with, it would just take the coordination with TxDOT and getting a better understanding of when their project is coming in relation to our project, and then, you know, if it makes sense for them to go first or us to go first, or for us to move the monument to a different location.
All right, so we've had a lot of great questions this evening. I want to circle back to one that we tabled earlier, and it's regards to economic development and potential land acquisition. So I want to come back to that and see if Monisha, if maybe you could spend a little bit more time speaking about the potential for economic development within this region and what that means.
Sure. I mean, I guess economic development can be a number of things. So, as part of our study, we're trying to figure out what types of land uses are needed. So, Mr. Williams, if you have thoughts about specific things, we'd be happy to look into that. As it is an unincorporated area of Harris County, I mean, there's no official zoning, but, a potential management district can, sort of incentivize particular businesses, or if there's a particular area that you think would be ripe for economic development or something that you'd like to see, we would love to hear that, and we can definitely look into it further.
So I think it was Eddie that had that question. So if there are any particular thoughts that you have on that, if you have our contact information, so please follow up with any more details or concerns that you may have, and we're happy to look in that into more detail and see if we can't answer your question more thoroughly. We have another one here in regards to the homeless outreach in the community. It's a question about proximity to the residential area and proximity within our schools. I believe this question is in regards to the proposed navigation center. And I would like to turn that over to Gretchen to answer. She's still on?
Had to unmute.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, let me review the question. How does this location benefit the homeless outreach community? Its proximity is centralized in a residential area and proximity within our 4 schools. Why isn't this located to more commercial areas that are less populated? Well, I mean, what I know is that and I know Dr. Culture is on the call, and so is Mr. Williams and Ramona. This is a proposed location, and they have brought it to the attention of the community, and we at the recent Highlands Lynchburg Chamber Luncheon, and this is something that they're just taking input from the community right now. I know that Highlands does, what I took my takeaway from that meeting the other day, the luncheon, was, Highlands is a very loving, giving community. Highlands Lynchburg, they do see the need for homeless. There are homeless, and the issues with the homeless need to be addressed. And yet, it's difficult to find a location that's going to please everyone. So, Dr. Kelcher, would you like to elaborate on that question as well? Because that is something that it's so preliminary. I don't know. I mean, I attend the meetings and I keep my boss commissioner informed, and the future is wide open with this right now.
I can
Yes, and
chime in
Eddie
a little bit as well, Gretchen. I think for the purposes of the community plan, I would say these recommendations are a little bit more broad. I think the general support is to, like Gretchen, like you said, it's finding a way to address these issues, and maybe not a specific type of a location or project, but just big picture support.
Commissioner supports, he wants to work with organizations and see what we can do. And so, I mean, just like public safety is one of his number one priority, he's got a passion for the homeless as well. And so there's a lot of initiatives out there, and just like it says, we want to improve the homeless outreach and aid within the community, support efforts by agencies and local nonprofits, and support advocacy efforts.
So I think Jorge was touching on Eric Burton's comment or question about, is the navigation specifically a part of the homeless outreach plan for this community plan? And as I just want to reiterate, it is not, we feel we need to be supportive of the homeless outreach and the comments that we've heard from the community, but there have not been any concrete recommendations at this moment. And we
I think
have.
we need to go back to Ramona's question in
Yes.
regards to, are the recommendations, will they addressed in the order of the presentation? No, they will not. At the next meeting, what you will see at the beginning, we had the short-term, intermediate and long-term process. And so the different ones, as we, take your comments this evening and, address them and integrate it into the overall recommendations. Part of that process at the end is then structuring these into those short-term and long-term projects. And so that'll help plan, plan for funding and looking for partnerships in order to achieve some of the implementation.
I did want to take a second. I know Ramona Williams had mentioned a little bit in the comments above about the recommendations being addressed in a certain type of order. And I wanted to say, to bring us back to this plan, right? And I appreciate all the comments. I think, that feedback is critical. There's a lot of recommendations that we're presenting here. And again, this is something that came up as part of a lot of conversations with the community, a lot of surveys, a lot of trying to understand what the needs and wants from the community are, right? So this is our first stab at what could be recommendations that you guys like and you guys support and the community as a whole like and support. And so there's not a priority that we have established. It's something that we want you to tell us, right? What's the priority in terms of these recommendations? And we're gonna keep taking feedback and keep tweaking them. But again, I wanted to remind everyone, we're here for you, right? We're here to serve you, and these recommendations are not something that we want to seem that comes from us. It really is something that we're trying to reflect the mirror back from the feedback that we have gotten, and again, we're open to suggestions and ideas on how to prioritize them and how to move forward. We're gonna wanna, I can tell you from the precinct side, we're gonna wanna start implementing before this plan is over, right? We wanna do good for the community, and so the more you can guide us in how to move forward and what priorities are sort of the lowest hanging fruit that we can start tomorrow, the better we can get going on this. So, okay, I'll hand it back over to Amanda.
So Eddie, I think you made a really good comment as well. Just like we are surveying for our community plan, I know that you're mentioning that your efforts and Dr. Tom's efforts and Ramona's efforts are also surveying, and nothing's etched in stone. Thank you for making that comment. To Amelia, you are asking where the surveys can be found. Can I clarify, are you asking for the surveys about this community plan, or are you asking about the surveys that Eddie was mentioning? Oh, thanks, Charmaine. Amelia, if you are talking about the surveys for this community plan, they are on the main website, and Charmaine has put that in the chat, highlandslynchburgplan.com. And if you scroll, you'll see a great video done by the commissioner, and you can click and take the survey there. We are still collecting results. And if you are not talking about that survey, then I will let Eddie maybe respond. And thank you, Angela. The projects look good on paper. You don't think that they address the priority concerns in Highland. Could I ask if you feel comfortable, what are some of the priority concerns in your opinion? And if you would like to send us a message later, or if you have any follow, and this actually goes for everyone. The second point on this slide over here is if anybody has any follow-up comments or questions or anything that you think of later as you're digesting all of this, If you go to the website, there is a place for you to place your comments and it goes directly to us. Or also you do have our emails. I know I've been sending lots of emails to this task force. So feel free to email us and let us know. We do have a running comment log that we are tracking everyone's input. We're making sure that we really want to make it known that we are hearing from you. We really do need your input. It's invaluable because we cannot do this without you. And I know Jorge has been preaching that this entire time.
Yeah, so I would like to, I know we've gotten a lot of great chats and I'm thankful that you guys have put them in there, but if we have about 10 minutes left for the meeting this evening. If anyone wants to unmute and just, join the conversation right now, you are welcome to do that. If you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you or you can unmute yourself as well.
This is Eddie Williams. And in regard to anybody who's interested in the concerns of the Navigation Center and the Homeless Project, we welcome and invite anybody who has any input. We have 14 meetings. And if you wanted to email or call me or Tom Keschner, Dr. Tom, or Ramona, we'd be more than happy to inform you as to when we meet. And we're looking for all the input that we can possibly get. My contact number is, my email is, I'll put it in the chat, but it's, well, I think I already did, but it's ewwmsjr@gmail.com. And my phone number is 832-967-3841. And I'll put it in again. And
Thanks, Eddie. Oh. And Eddie's audio broke up just a little bit, but he was saying that they have core team, CORE core team meetings. On my end, it sounded like you had 14 meetings and I was 14 meetings. Okay.
I think we've had more than that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right. Is there anyone else that would like to unmute and join the conversation this evening? All right. So I'm going to take that as a no since everyone's quiet and let Amanda go through just the next steps in a little more detail. Oops.
Okay, so our next steps, as I mentioned, if you have any follow-up comments or concerns or questions, please reach out to us on any of the different forums, the website being one that is, you can get on in when you are gathering the recording that will be posted on there of this meeting with the video and the slides. It will all be on there. And while you're digesting, if you want to go ahead and put a comment in the forums there, or you can, again, email us. And you also can feel free to email Gretchen or Jorge. I know their contact information has been given out several times before. And then also we are planning to take the comments that we've heard tonight, do our vetting, do our more due diligence, follow up on these several items that came up as main questions, main comments, and really hone in on what that recommendation will look like, who the partners could be, what the funding sources could be, and a possible timeline for each of those. And then our plan is to come back to the public. So not just the task force, but the entire public. We will advertise for that meeting with the use of signs and flyers and mailers. And that will be in early 2022. So we're hoping that everybody can sit on this during the holiday season, think about the community, think about what the real priorities are, the real needs are, and let us know how you feel about these recommendations so that we can turn it around in early 2022 for some concrete recommendations and finalize our report. Jorge, do you have any closing words?
Yes, thank you, Amanda, and thank you, everyone. I think I've keep chiming on the same idea, but again, it's a community-led plan. We're looking for you, especially as a task force, to give us guidance. So I do appreciate everyone spending their evening with us. You could have done a number of different things, but you chose to be here and fight for your community. So I can relate to that very much. And so with that, I would like to say, this recording will be on the website. So if you know of anyone who wasn't able to make it today, feel free to let them know to come back, go through the recording, go through the slides, reach out to us, give us more feedback. It's always an open door, and we want to hear more from you. So I appreciate everyone's time, and if there's no more questions, I'm happy to give you the balance of your time back, which is 3 minins.
Good job, guys. And just, oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
no, everything as well. Thank you all for joining in, and I appreciate all of you, and please reach out to me whenever, except for next week. I'm going to be on vacation. But you can still reach out to me. I'm still got my email, my cell phone.
And I want to also thank everyone for filling out the surveys, for being here tonight. And also I want to thank our consultant team, Monisha and Nick, for being on this call, and Ismat and her team at Public Health. Thank you guys for being on this and helping out with our recommendations. With that, I hope everybody has a good Christmas and a great rest of Hanukkah. Thank you, guys.
Happy
Bye,
everything.
everyone. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Did you stop recording? Not yet. Not yet.